Samurai Jack was one of the darker shows that aired on Cartoon Network. Even before it was moved to Adult Swim, it didn't hold back telling stories of slavery and oppression, death and war, and the constant struggle of good versus evil. Even the ending was a bittersweet reminder that life sometimes doesn't play out as one hopes. But in a future overrun by a dark lord, who's the most good and who is the most evil? Hey guys, I'm Brad with Wicked Binge, and this is Samurai Jack, Good to Evil. While Jack encountered a lot of enemies and made a lot of allies, not all of them have enough for us to really discuss. For this list, we'll be covering the most developed and recurring characters in the series. As usual, we'll be starting with the most pure and noble character and working our way down. These characters are the good. Taking the gold medal of most good, we have Jack. From a young age, Jack had been taught that he was meant to be a hero. His morals were instilled from not only his father and grandmother, but from the many chiefs and tribes that helped raise him. Jack had spent every waking moment of his younger years learning new skills, all of which he had been able to incorporate along his journey to defeat a coup and find a way back to his time. Though Jack rarely was in a position to gain anything from helping others along his journey, he still made a point to step in where he could. He was able to get the Woolies to freedom, breaking them out in order to rise against their oppressors. There had been a few times when Jack had a chance to get home, and instead opted to stay in the future to aid those nearby, such as the archers and Shaolin monks. When Jack found himself stuck with Ashi, he rose above the need for petty revenge and brought her along as he looked for a way to escape the beast that ate him. Though she attempted to kill him and shouted abuse at him, Jack tried to meet her as calmly as he could. He kept trying to reach out to her, explaining that a coup had drowned the world in darkness. After they escaped, Jack gave Ashi the option to continue her hatred towards him or finally see for herself that a coup was in the wrong. As Ashi was holding off enemies, Jack was struggling with the more aggressive side of himself. After all the years he spent wandering looking for portals, it's understandable that he would begin to wonder if he was doomed. The idea of being stuck in a life where he would have to keep running from his greatest enemy made Jack bitter and angry, nearly lashing out at Ashi. But Jack was able to overcome his doubt. The only time he was unable to follow through with his goal was when he was faced with the choice of killing Ashi along with a coup or allowing himself to be a prisoner. The silver medal of most good goes to Jack's father and grandmother. In the very first episode, Jack's father and grandmother made arrangements on how to save Jack should a coup ever be released from the pit. While his father was made a slave along with the other villagers, his grandmother was able to meet one of the other chiefs that would take him far away from the carnage. When Jack grew older, having grown into an experienced fighter, his grandmother held on to the sword that was destined for Jack to wield against a coup before leading him back home. As for the former emperor, he was still a force for his people to rally behind. Though weak with thirst and working to the point of collapsing, the old ruler still made sure that Jack didn't just rush into a fight with a coup without being prepared. The bronze medal of most good goes to the former servant of a coup, Ashi. When she arrives in Season 5, she was dedicated to the Dark Lord of the land. She was brainwashed from a very early age and thrown into training from the group known as the Daughters of a Coup. Ashi wasn't a random child that had been abducted and taken by the cult. She was a product of the High Priestess and a coup himself. Unlike the other children in training, Ashi was curious about the outside world. She stopped sparring with the other children when she feared it would result in a ladybug being killed, though she was quickly punished for her mercy. After Jack spared her life, Ashi began to rethink the lessons that had been implanted in her head, and one of the most satisfying stories of character development, Ashi went out in the world on her own to see for herself all the people that Jack had helped over the years. The revelation she reached led to her scrubbing the coal from her body and devoting her loyalty to Jack. While she was the true child of a coup, her love of Jack allowed her to break free of a coup's control and defeat him in Jack's place. Next, we have the Scotsman. While he's initially abrasive and hard to get along with, the Scotsman proved himself to be a valuable friend to Jack. When they first meet, they don't see eye to eye. The two of them argue over which of them is the strongest and who should be the one to show any form of submission. After the Scotsman learned that Jack was the top enemy against a coup, he respected Jack and had no issue fighting alongside him. In a later episode, when Jack is found working on a ship with no memory of his prior life, the Scotsman took it upon himself to drag Jack around and retrace his steps, interrogating everyone they came across in the hopes of jogging Jack's memory. Even after his passing, the Scotsman was the closest ally Jack had. He raised his 20 daughters on stories of Jack's legacy, encouraged them to become fine warriors just like he himself had been. Next on our list are the Shaolin monks. Hidden away from Aku's influence, they're able to train and maintain their way of life, coming across Jack purely by accident. We stated before that Jack was raised by various chiefs and leaders, and that Zhao Lin had been among those people. Because of Jack's knowledge of their fighting style, the monks took Jack in and provided protection. When Jack had an opportunity to go back to his time, the monks that first encountered him vowed to keep him from being stopped by Aku's minions. Though they were outnumbered and faced a high risk of being killed, they still wanted to provide Jack coverage while Jack made it home. In the end, they overcame Aku's henchmen when Jack stayed behind to fight alongside the Zhao Lin. While they were grateful for the help and to be alive, they were clearly upset that Jack was still stuck in the future and that they felt they failed him. Our next ranking goes to the robot X-49. Programmed to be another assassin android made to serve Aku, X-49 stood apart from the rest of the robots. He had been given an experimental chip that led to X-49 being able to develop emotions and learn right from wrong. He came to resent the way his fellow robots were treated, hating how they were unable to live with free will and sent to die fighting for Aku. Though X-49 only appeared in a single episode, he left an impact on the fan base, not only because of his morals and determination to survive, but because of his attachment to a dog he came across, later named Lulu. The bond between them became so strong that Aku eventually had to use Lulu as leverage to get X-49 to fight Jack with the promise of the dog being returned. However, X-49 wouldn't receive his happy ending. He met his end at Jack's hand, with his final words being pleas for Jack to take care of Lulu. Next is the Imakandi. Unlike the others that tried to bring Jack in, the Imakandi had no interest in being paid. They only accepted the task of hunting Jack because they saw it as a chance to experience the greatest hunt they could. It was one of the most nail-biting encounters Jack had faced, with him being unable to escape in the end as he had done so many times before. But rather than hand Jack over to Aku, they insisted on letting Jack free. Next, we have the Creature. At first glance, they come off as little more than a low-budget Totoro, but while the creature looks harmless, it's fierce when protecting those it considers allies. After the creature ruined the chance for Jack to return to his own time, a rift was created in their already fragile relationship. But as soon as Jack was in trouble, this beast bounded to the rescue and showed a level of fierceness that surprised not only Jack, but many viewers. Next on the list is the Samurai. He was once an egotistical man who used wielding a sword as an intimidation tactic to get what he wanted. When he first meets Jack, the Samurai had been a loud and obnoxious customer at a local tavern. He didn't take kindly to being called out by Jack and was happy to get a chance to show off. When it became clear that Jack was a true warrior, the Samurai begged to learn from him. When the Samurai reappeared in Season 5, he stated that he put down his sword so as not to disrespect the path any more than he already had. Next up is the man dubbed Monkey Man by Jack. Once a child that had been enslaved by minions to Aku, he wandered off from his work and was adopted by a tribe of monkeys. After he found Jack and brought him to the tribe, Monkey Man explains that the larger beasts of the forest took advantage of the tribe's passiveness. Food and territory would often be stolen from them, leading to the tribe becoming desperate for a solution. Monkey Man then makes an agreement with Jack. He would teach the samurai to jump high like him if Jack taught them how to protect themselves from the other creatures that lurked in the forest. Like many other allies, Monkey Man made another appearance in Season 5, helping to take down Aku and his minions in the final showdown. Now we have a keeper of one of the portraits, the Guardian. Jack lost a lot of chances to return to his own time, but this battle was one of the most difficult to watch. The Guardian wasn't a henchman to Aku. He didn't have an ulterior motive to steal Jack's strength or turn him in. Instead, the Guardian kept Jack from going through the portal because he felt Jack wasn't worthy. After their confrontation, the Guardian allows Jack to live, giving us a vision of a possible future where Jack had become a stronger warrior and implying that Jack would one day be worthy of returning home. With that said, we've arrived at neutral territory. These characters fall in the gray area. Taking the first spot in this section, we have the gangsters. Set up like classic mobsters, they offered Jack a job with their crew, so long as Jack could help them retrieve the Jewel of Neptune. When Jack said his only real interest was to get close enough to Aku to attack him, the gangsters made a questionable call. They jumped Jack, keeping him from lunging at Aku, but they also begged Aku for mercy. They hadn't realized how much damage Jack was capable of making and had assumed they were protecting someone in over their head. We also had to knock them into a lower spot for capitalizing on people needing water. They planned on using the Jewel of Neptune to create clean water, which they would then charge ridiculous prices for. Now we have one of the most well-dressed antagonists in cartoon history, the Thief. When Jack was on the hunt for a jewel needed to help him return to the past, the Thief was introduced as someone who was only interested in a quick buck. With their disagreements, it had almost looked like the Thief was going to come out on top with the jewel in hand, and Jack being used as a decoy. However, in a surprising turn of events, the Thief fought alongside Jack for them to both get to safety. In the end, the jewel shattered in the conflict, and the Thief was left to find another score. Next, we have Xdor. Xdor had made a deal with Aku to work with him and help take down Jack, but only so his own people would be spared. However, his village fell into ruin anyway. When Jack arrived, Xdor offered to help him by lending Jack his last weapon, an arm that would help Jack cut through the robots. While there was a slight hiccup with the power running out in the arm, Jack was successful. Xdor may have been wrong in trusting someone like Aku, but we understand that the deal was made out of desperation. Next, we have the bounty hunter couple, Josephine and Ezekiel Clench. They may not have intended to work together when they came across Jack on the train, but they made a good duo. The two had very different methods of taking down Jack and collecting the bounty. Josephine utilized gentleman's combat and used seduction to lure people into a false sense of security. She also used weapons well hidden or disguised as everyday items, such as her handy umbrella. With Zeke, he preferred the more traditional approach of brute force. Like his wife, he was an excellent sharpshooter, but he also relied heavily on his robotic hands, which held nets, tasers, and his pistols. It isn't entirely clear what their motivation to catch Jack was, aside from just having more money in their pockets. However, it is hinted that Josephine's interest might have been to regain her husband's attention. When Zeke first realized his wife was on board, his reaction was a mix of annoyance, having to compete with her, and concern over her getting involved with a wanted man like Jack. Though they weren't successful catching the samurai, they did become closer throughout the chase. Finally, we've reached the dark side. These characters are the bad and the evil. Next, we have the mind-controlling DJ Stylepator. This villain made use of the youth in the nearby villages, using his music to control them. In a lot of ways, his methods of trying to create the children of Aku was a prototype for the daughters of Aku that would be shown later in the series. However, his use of the children wasn't as bad as it could have been. Yes, training all the teens to follow his command like a raving Pied Piper was messed up, but he only used the ability to have the teens rob the villages of things like jewelry and food. And when the kids were in his care, he just kept them partying. Sure, music was how he controlled them, but he could have just as easily only used music when they had to retrieve supplies, keeping them caged the rest of the time. This doesn't excuse his actions, but he does get a higher spot than many other villains because of this choice. Coming in next on our list is Scaramouche. He was comic relief, but don't be fooled by the optimism and friendly smile. Behind those quips was a homicidal maniac. The only reason we don't feel right about ranking him lower on this list is because a large part of his behavior was his programming. He happily brags about being Aku's favorite henchman, using the phony claim as a way to harass others and try to gain favor among other fighters. His delusion was what became his downfall, having been finished off by Aku after Jack had spared him. Well, as much as an android can be considered spared when they have to hop around as only a head. Our next ranking goes to Damongo. He was created by the same pit that Aku was freed from. Once a formidable foe, after Jack freed the souls, he was reduced to only being able to use teleportation. When the warriors Damongo used turned against him, he pleaded with Aku for another chance, only to be crushed by the ruler he served. Throughout his time serving Aku, Damongo was responsible for the downfall of countless fighters and helped to spread terror across the land. Taking the bronze medal of most evil are the Battle Dome officials. These guys had brought back an old tradition of brutality, pitting men against one another in the ring. After they captured Jack, they drug him to compete in a showdown to the death. It's hard to say how many warriors fell inside those walls, but they had clearly gotten enough prisoners to make a science out of the operation. They didn't gather any glory with Aku over making the warriors face one another, and there really isn't much of a guarantee that all the people who died in the ring were trained fighters. Our silver medal of most evil goes to the High Priestess. Leader of the daughters of Aku, she forced the young girls in their care to train in the name of their ruler. While the entirety of the daughters of Aku had malicious intent, the High Priestess enforced the brainwashing. We see through Ashi's memories that the High Priestess didn't allow the girls she was training to be tainted by the outside world. Any mercy was met with harsh discipline. We also see through Ashi that the black adorned on their bodies was the result of a specific ritual in which the girls would be forced to lay on and walk across hot coals. When Ashi began thinking for herself, the High Priestess appeared in her thoughts, telling her how useless and cowardly she was. It was a clear way of showing how much of a traumatic experience being in her care was. Even if she hadn't insisted on training the young girls to fight, she refused to show any love or affection to the young children, which would have left an emotional scar either way. Finally, taking the gold medal of most evil is Aku. Aku is a great villain, but he's actually pretty funny. But that didn't change the fact that Aku was a ruthless antagonist that set everything in the series into motion. From the moment he was freed, Aku was driven to do one thing: to enslave humanity. Aku only showed leniency to those that showed absolute devotion to him, and even that kindness took centuries for him to develop. Aku had sent various henchmen and bounty hunters to stop Jack, crushing any that failed to appease him. There had been an instance in which Jack and Aku had a more civil face-off early in the series. During this brawl, Aku tried every underhanded trick to win. That wouldn't be surprising, but the fight was set up rather evenly, with Aku agreeing not to use his powers if Jack agreed not to use the sword. You know, the sword which was the only surefire way to defeat him. Aku couldn't even handle being doubted by the children of the land. When stories of Jack reached the villages and none of the kids wanted to play the role of Aku, the ruler took it personally. He went out of his way to talk about how awesome and powerful he was. Lying about a few powers or an origin story wasn't the most vile thing Aku had ever done, but it wasn't exactly honest either. And of course, who could forget how he finally got close to taking down Jack? When Aku finally had Jack in his clutches, he used Jack's love of Ashi against him. Not only did Aku make Jack submit to his will, but Aku delighted in the idea of using Ashi as his weapon to finally kill Jack. Alright, before we go, we wanted to hand out some extra medals to the characters that fit them best. The Lust medal we're giving to Ashi. After meeting Jack, Ashi was able to embrace the outside world. She dove into every new experience with an open mind and a smile on her face, all while fighting alongside Jack. Next is the Wrath medal, going to the High Priestess. Not only did this woman torment countless other women in the name of Aku, but she victimized countless children. Even her own daughter wasn't safe from her brutal punishments. The Greed medal we're giving to Aku. He wasn't content in just taking over a few regions here and there or controlling an army or two. Aku wanted everyone's love and admiration on top of taking all their resources. I mean, he even attended a small class to boast about how he got his powers. The Sloth medal we're awarding to the DJ Stalbator. Using music to brainwash a bunch of teens was a smart enough idea to grow his power without facing an angry mob. However, when it came to villains, he took the easiest approach and wound up doing the bare minimum. Next, we have the Pride medal, going to the Samurai. He spent a good portion of his youth using his sword to intimidate others and get whatever he wanted. Even when the Samurai put down his blade, he used his interaction with Samurai Jack as a way to brag about himself. Finally, we have the Gluttony medal, which goes to Damongo. We never see him feed in the typical sense, but consuming the souls of warriors certainly counts. He could have easily stopped at a few strong fighters, but Damongo wanted all the power and the fear that came with it. Alright guys, that's the list. What do you think? Who are the most good and evil characters in Samurai Jack? Let us know in the comment section. Don't forget to hit that notification bell and binge our Good to Evil playlist, where we break down the morality of the characters in your favorite cartoons, shows, and movies. But most importantly, stay wicked.